screen keeps popping up, all those coming in, right? Praise be to Allah.
Wow, this.
So, I said that I grew up in foster care. So at the age of 5, I went into foster care because, I was in a sexually abused. No, at the age of 10, I went into foster care. From 5 to 10, I was being sexually abused by my stepfather. At 10 years of age, I had enough courage to tell my teacher that I was being sexually abused. And at that point in time, when I went into foster care. And so at the age of 10, I had an opportunity to go to court and experience what the process may be like. I never had a trial, but they were preparing me for one. And in that process, at that moment, they put me in the witness box to give my testimony.
Wow.
I made a decision. It was a very clear decision at that time. And they used the word advocate, and they kept saying advocate. And the prosecutor said, I'm going to advocate for you. And I never forget, I said at that moment that I was going to advocate for those who could not advocate for themselves. And when I tell you becoming a lawyer was the easiest thing out of all of the things that I've ever witnessed and encountered, that was it, because I was very clear on what I thought advocating or the means in which I was going to advocate, and that was becoming a lawyer.
Wow. You, like, hearing you talk, you just gave me some other questions that I'm going to ask, but it's interesting. So being that you use the word testimony, and you have a wealth of experience as an attorney. From your experience as an attorney, like, how significant is a testimony in a court of law?
I'm glad you asked. It's absolutely significant. So you have certain types of testimony. You have physical testimony, and then you have the oral or the written testimony. And in the oral testimony, you're dealing with eyewitness account, or you're dealing with the expert testimony, someone who has studied and who has the degrees to back it up and the experience to back it up. But that verbal, that oral testimony, that eyewitness testimony is super important, because you can have all the physical evidence that you want, but unless you know for yourself what that evidence means and understands what it means, then it really means nothing. So the oral testimony is very important in any type of criminal case, civil case, any trial, anything dealing with the legal aspect. What kind of testimony do you have to prove or back up what you are saying?
Wow. So, well, this wasn't a scheduled question, but it just popped. So how significant, with what you just said about a testimony, how significant is it for one to give a testimony on the behalf of a man like the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, in your view?
Okay, first of all, let me back up, because I did not give our followers, our believers, our brothers and our sisters and our families the greetings. So I want to say Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak. Now, that question is, so I want to go to the scripture, if that's okay with you.
Of course, by all means.
So there's a scripture that always just laid heavy on my heart when we talk about testimonies and testifying, and especially as it concerns the women and the woman. And so in John chapter 4, Jesus met a woman at the well, at the Jacob's well. She was a Samaritan woman. And the history behind this woman was very sketchy. She had been married 5 times, and the man that she was with was not her husband. And when Jesus came to come drink from this well, and him being a Jew and her being a Samaritan, and him asking her for water, it was almost like blasphemy. I can't give you water because you're from another people. And he said, that which I give you and that which the Father gives you is living water, and you will no longer have to thirst. And then he started telling her about herself. And there weren't good things about herself that he was telling her about. But she didn't flinch from that. She was amazed, and she was thankful that she had met a man that was able to give her and quench her thirst and give her that water, that life-giving water that may take her. So it didn't stop from there, because when she left, she went to go tell her people in the town of Samaritan. And, because of her testimony, even with her background, that they believed what she said and came to know Jesus for themselves. So I say that as a woman because I don't have a flawless background. I have a lot of people who look up to me. I inspire, I motivate, but trust and believe that my background was stained and blemished, probably like some of y'all's. I don't profess to be, also spiritual. I just strive to work, in Islam, and my life and my death are all for Islam. But when we talk about testimonials and the man of God, and talking about the man of God, how he touched our lives in the Christian church, to give your testimony is to tell how you encountered and you were saved by Jesus. And I can definitely say that the Jesus in our midst, none other than the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, hearing him and listening to him, that I was tremendously saved by him, because Lord knows I was going on, not on the straight path, but I was going on that other path that we pray about that we don't want to be on. And so I prayed to Allah, that he would guide me on the straight path. And he did, because my heart's desire was to be and is to be one with Allah. So encountering, because it was an encounter at first, the man of God. I knew right then and there, that's where I needed to be.
Wow. Well, every time we do these interviews, they always, God hands takes over, and the responses lead right up to the next question without being coached. So you talked about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and what he has done and means in your life. So can you share with the viewers and the audience how you actually came to Islam?
Yes, absolutely. So one of my foster mothers, she was very, very, very active in the community. She activism was her thing. So when she would go do these protests here in Houston, she would bring me with her. So I was like 13, 14 years of age, and I'm, no justice, no peace. And so I've always had this bit on, freedom, justice, and equality, and fighting. If you knew me back then, they used to call me Mike Tyson, because if somebody was being bullied, I would be the one that they would ask to go fight the person. And I had no qualms about it. I was in middle school, and it might have been a high schooler, but I did not like the fact that people were being bullied. And so activism was really, really strong in my life coming up. And my mother told me that we were going to go to see this man speak. I was about 15 years old. And so I didn't know anything about Minister Louis Farrakhan. I just knew that she said, we're going to go hear a powerful man speak. So when we come up to the event at the Coliseum in 1990, and I just remember the first thing that I saw was the MGT, the mighty MGT. And they were beautiful in their garments, but they were regal, they were strong. It was just something about the regalness that struck me about these women. And there was on check post checking us. And I remember that. And the Coliseum is not like a lightweight place. It's like a huge facility of tens and thousands of seats. And so when I go in, we just see lines and lines of people. And I'm like, who is this Black man? Who is this man that we're about to see? And I remember, I don't know how we got some good tickets, but I remember being on the floor close to the front. And I heard the speakers come and talk about this Black man and getting the crowd ready in anticipation. And then this beautiful Black man came out. And I just remember being mesmerized. It was like I had this lock that needed the master code to unlock it, or this antenna. I became tuned into this man. And it was just something about him that mesmerized me. And I remember remembering his words like years to pass. I remember, him talking about his mother and how she tried to abort him, but there was something special about him for the Black people. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I thank Allah, because after it was over, here I'm a high school student, knee deep into the church, or eyeball deep into the church, with all of these posts as a youth president of our YPD department. And I kept thinking about Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. And it just so happens that same year, when school started in the fall, I was taking AP English, and my white teacher, Miss Greeny, I'll never forget. She wanted her class to be sympathetic to the Black plight. So it was only two Black people in the class. So she made a decision to have us read the autobiography of Malcolm X by Alex Haley.
Wow.
Now that I heard the minister and I saw this beautiful Black man, I got to read about the Nation of Islam and our brother's journey in the Nation of Islam. So it only made me fall in love even more. But because I was in the church, I was tremendously torn. So I have a cousin who her friends were in the mosque here in Houston, and they were going to a Friday night study group. And so we were trying to sneak off, trying to figure out ways how to go to the study group while going to Wednesday night Bible study. And, you know, at that moment, I started studying more about apartheid. I started studying more about our history as Black people in the struggle. But the whole time, like, my heart and my mind was looking towards, our Jesus. And I was torn between Christianity. But now I know that to be a good Christian is to be a good Muslim. And, I went to seminary school. I'm a seminary dropout. I'm gonna be honest. It took a lot to get into seminary school. It was like going to law school. It was a 3-year program. And my first year in seminary school, I did very well. And I was in a preaching class. And I didn't realize that as a Southern Baptist seminary school, women were not allowed to preach. Men, we could do Sunday school with the teacher, but there was a mistake on my schedule, and they put me in a class with the men.
Wow.
So, only female in the class. And I did the theoretical. And then when it was time for me to do the actual lab, I had favor with the professor. For some reason, he liked me. And I don't know, he didn't get the memo either, or he just decided he was just going to ignore the memo. And it was at that time when I took this practical class, that my classmates decided that they were going to boycott me if I was allowed to get up and do my sermon. Wow. And I never forget, that morning that it was time for me to do my sermon, and I was ready and I was nervous, and it was who was going to minister to the minister. That was what it was going to be about. And Elijah under the juniper tree. Wow. And my professor calls me and he says, Sadiyah, unfortunately, I made a mistake and I'm going to give you an A, but you can't come to class and deliver your sermon. And I was gut punched. But I was mad at the same time. And, I acquiesced, but the anger started, filling up in me, because I was like, how can you do this? How can you, discriminate against us when, again, the woman at the well, she was the one who, told about a man named Jesus and gave the gospel. And then, I thought about the women at the feet of Jesus who, when Jesus was on the cross, went and gave a testimony and gave a gospel. And so I was just thinking of all of these opportunities, but at the same time, I was kind of like sneaking, studying the teachers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's exactly what I was doing. I was, befriending some of the believers. I was involved in community activism. So of course, we as believers, the Muslims, we're always at the forefront of what's going on. And so, at that time, Allah was working on me. But what the last straw was they had a class for Islam to teach us about Islam. But it wasn't in a way of bringing, uniting us, but it was a way to show the quote unquote heathenism and the blasphemy and, just all the negative aspects about Islam. And then at that point, I made a decision to drop out. And during that time, I was working in politics. City of Houston, I was a chief of staff, and our local minister here, Southwest Regional Minister, Brother Abdul Halim Muhammad, he was always on the forefront of whatever was going on in the city of Houston. And I remember him coming to this big gathering after 9/11 that I had organized with all the federal departments. And he came and he stood up and all the brothers stood up and he just spoke a mighty word. And the congresswoman said, come to the front stage, brother. His name was Brother Robert at the time. Brother Robert, come to the front stage. And just hearing him. And so later on, and this is how you know the hand of God was on me, is I would see Brother Abdul Halim come to the city of Houston, and I would like whisper to him, ask him questions about Islam, while I had one foot in the church, but one foot in the teachings. And I was trying to get my nerve. I don't know. I didn't want to disappoint people. You know, I was becoming a leader in the church, but my leaning was always towards Islam and these teachings and listening to Minister Louis Farrakhan. And so one day I asked Brother Abdul Halim, how do you become a Muslim? He said, it's really easy. You have to believe that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad is his messenger. And he said, accept your own and be yourself. I said, is that it? He said, yes. And so one day I just made that decision. And my life has totally changed 180 degrees because I made that I took the life-giving water. I took the life-giving water, I accepted it, and I decided that I wanted to follow a man, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, who has helped his teacher and Master Fard Muhammad raise many people from the dead. And I wanted to be one of those helpers. You still there, Brother Willie? I think we lost Brother Willie.
Yeah, it was on mute. But
oh, okay.
I can hear you. Very powerful testimony. Man, when you talked about your experience at the Baptist seminary, you know, many people would think such responses toward women happen like that in Islam. So what do you consider like some of the major myths or misunderstandings about women, in particular in the Nation of Islam, and how would you respond to address those, rebut those myths and misunderstandings?
Oh, you said it exactly like this. It's a myth. So we have this idea, or the public has this idea that women are oppressed, and women are oppressed in Islam. But in the Nation of Islam, you know, oppression of women is shunned. Absolutely not. We're not going to oppress the women. What I found is that the women are actually revered. The womb of the woman is actually revered. And I had never heard so. The first time a brother, it was an FOI, he acknowledged me as queen. And it wasn't like he was trying to hit on me. It wasn't, you know, he was trying to shoot his shot. You know, it was a sincere queen. And it resonated with my spirit such that, you know, like, what is this? That we are queens and the brothers are protecting us to feel the safety and security. It made me, my femininity just flourish. But, you know, we're taught in the Nation of Islam, home is our base, but not necessarily our place. And that we can rise to any level that God has blessed us and desired and skilled us to do, and be, as long as we don't act other than ourselves. And we're not other than ourselves. And so in Islam, you know, it allowed me the opportunity to really be who I am and flourish who I am, but have these 7 units to become refined. And Islam dignifies. I can bear witness to that. But I know that I would not have been elevated in my legal career the way that I have, or in my community, but because of what Islam has given me as a female, as a woman. And so I am absolutely proud and honored to be a mighty MGT, because I feel like I have superpowers. I saw something that say, are you a superhero? She say, baby, superheroes don't have nothing on the Black woman. So, you know, in the Nation of Islam, that, you know, 75% of the teachings are with the women. We are taught that a nation can rise no higher than its woman. I never heard that before.
Mm.
I never heard that before. But when you actually live it and study it and practice it, oh, there's power, not egotistical power that comes with that. But there's a God force that comes with that, the power that comes with that. And in the Nation of Islam, you know, the Black woman is revered.
That's beautiful answer. So we talk so much about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Do you remember, now we want to talk about, do you remember the first time you had the opportunity to meet or talk with the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan? And if so, can you describe that experience and what stood out to you the most about that experience?
Absolutely. So I was a baby in the Nation of Islam, or I considered myself a baby in the Nation of Islam. And our beautiful brother, our student national secretary, brother Saad Muhammad, at the time, he was Burvi Muhammad. And before he was on that post, he had invited the attorneys to come, all the nation's attorneys, him and brother, all the nation's attorney. This was, I believe, was back in 2009. And I was just there. I was just so happy to be in that number. I didn't want to say nothing. I didn't want to jockey for a position. I just wanted to see that beautiful Black man and hear what he had to say for us, so that I may take his words and just follow his instructions. And so at that time, we're in the big room and all the attorneys are sitting behind a table. And, of course, you see the minister and you see a God in the flesh. So it's a beautiful thing. So just to being able to be there and be one of the nation's attorneys and be a servant of Allah and a servant to his messenger and his master student was tremendously a blessing. And then I remember that night we had an opportunity to eat at his table, and I wasn't sitting at the table. I had like a little corner table next to him.
Yeah.
But I was so happy to be at that table, and I still have the menu, everything that he said. I wrote everything down. I just felt blessed for this time, this dispensation of time, to be able to serve in the capacity that I was serving on behalf of our nation. So just to see him, and I remember one thing, if anybody knows me, they know I love hot food and Tabasco sauce. So Tabasco sauce on his table, and he put it in his bean soup, and I was done.
So he likes Tabasco sauce too, I've heard. So in preparation for this interview, I reached out to our National Secretary, Brother Saad, and just to get some questions, right? And one of the questions that I just wanted to know, what's a good question I can ask our sister? And he talked about how, I guess this was the second time when you had at the dinner table, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, where there was a sister and you were trying to get some words for the sister from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And the minister said that he would, and then you asked, Brother Minister, would you mind recording a recording? Can you share that experience and what stood out to you?
Absolutely. I wasn't going to share that experience because I didn't have permission, but it sounds like I do. Thank you, Brother Saad, for that. Whew. So I believe it was 2017, and July 6th. Well, I had an opportunity, Brother Saad had given me an opportunity working on our dear brother, Student Minister Robert Muhammad's case, and just soldiering with him. And so I had an opportunity to meet the minister through Brother Saad. And it was such if y'all look on my Facebook or my Instagram, you see the hug and just me smiling like a little girl. And I got the little wraparound arm. It was such a blessing to be able to be face to face, and for him to acknowledge the work that I had been doing in the Nation of Islam on behalf of our beautiful dear brother Robert. Mm-hmm. And then that was during graduation time. So right before, or maybe right after, one of the students at the Elevated Places, he did a message for the students at the Elevated Places. I think you may have spoken during that time, brother.
And I was in Houston when you were in Chicago then.
Okay.
Wow.
So he had did a graduation message for those who graduated. And I remember hearing the valedictorian at that time, her name wasn't called. And I knew that, it wasn't nothing intentional on the minister. But I'm always trying to advocate for somebody. So I did feel
Man.
some kind of way that I wanted to, bring it up. So when I had the opportunity, the next day after I had met the minister officially through Brother Saad, we sat at his table, and you can't sit at his table without him giving some beautiful jewels and instructions. And so I don't know what compelled me, Brother Willie. I was so out of line. I acknowledge that at the time, but I was compelled um, to ask the minister if, to he brought it up about Sister Mariam, and he was very apologetic, um, that he had missed her name. But nothing happens without Allah's permission.
Mm.
And so I had my phone, like, I remember, like, off. And something just said, ask the minister. I always believe a closed mouth don't get fed. Ask, all I can say is no. And so Brother Saad is sitting next to me. And I say, Brother Minister, do you mind doing the video for Mariam? And Brother Saad, he gave me that look like, I know you just didn't ask the man of God who brought you to this table. And I was like, okay. So I had to clean that up later. Minister say no. No, and I'm paraphrasing. But I was good with that, I was good with that. So then he started to teach, about our heart, when things don't go our way, start
Mm.
teaching about, we have to be purified in our own heart. And when disappointment comes, what comes out? And so, I was just glad for the opportunity. So I had left it alone, the fact that he said no. And I understood. And then he said, go get your phone. I said, you serious? And he said, yes. And
Wow.
for the work that I have done and contributed to our nation, he obliged to my request. And it was an off request. I realize it now in my babiness, in my, childishness at that time. I recognize now. But at that time, I wanted to give some, so salve to the young sister.
Mm.
But I learned so much from that experience. And I learned how gracious he is, and how loving he is, and how he is the pure embodiment of love.
Mm.
He really, really, really loves us.
Mm.
And even in the loving whooping that I got, right?
Mm.
That he loves his children. And because it came from a sincere place, that he obliged my my request.
Wow. That's
That I'm really grateful for.
I'm beautiful. I'm beautiful. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. We also know you mentioned already how you have been working with our national secretary and others on the case for justice for our brother Robert. And I'm not asking you to get into the details, but Brother Saad told me about how the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan traveled over 100 miles just to sit and watch the proceedings. Like, what does that tell us about a man that will do something like that, and from your perspective?
That he is interested in our affairs.
Mm.
He's interested in our affairs no matter what. I know a lot of us can bear witness that we may be going through something, and he's tuned in. His antenna is so large that whatever it is that we may be going through, that he speaks to it, and that there is nothing. So, he takes our letters. He listens to what we have to say. When we're having issues, he addresses them directly. For example, what he did with Sister Mariam, he addresses us no matter how small or how big. And for him to do that, it just shows the love that he has, and he's interested in all of our affairs. So that right there, that's just love manifest, right?
Yeah.
Pure
And
love.
so And like you said, no one can be around the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and find a moment where he's not teaching, right? He's teaching. Even after he gives a lecture for 3 or 4 hours, he comes back at the table and he's still teaching to the night hours. So from and I know you've been around, you've heard the minister speak about, probably talk about the law, the legal system in America. Like what have you learned that has helped you what have you learned from him, hearing him teach about the law of God that has helped you as an attorney and help you to understand the law better?
So, and here in Houston, people know me as the godly warrior lawyer, you know, because everything that I do, I'm always, you know, the greatest force is the remembrance of Allah. And my clients know this. That I'm always putting Allah at the forefront of whatever it is that we do. And because of those interactions we had as attorneys with the minister on more than one occasion, because of this case, working with Brother Saad, super spiritual brother who's always looking into the scripture, always, you know, I call him a Sudoku spiritualist, because he will find whatever the sign, the number is, and point to our minister as it concerns. And so, you know, and the supreme wisdom, because he told us when we met with him, and he pulled up the supreme wisdom, and he said, it's not all of the stacks of books, of law books that we have that will make us successful. It was this little bitty supreme wisdom book that would make us successful and all did as attorneys. And I took that to heart. And so, you know, and with these teachings, you have a different atmosphere about you, you know, when we go into a certain place. And when I go into a certain place with certainty of who Allah is and what he can do in faith, you know, whatever the outcome may be for my client or whoever I'm dealing with, the enemy, a lot of times it's the enemy, you know, we're always the victor, no matter what it is. And keeping my integrity, my ethics, and being a woman of God. And because of what I have been given through these teachings, through the minister, through his love, through what we've been taught in our MGT class, you know, how to act at home and abroad, then as a lawyer, I know for a fact that as a Muslim MGT lawyer, and there's several here, you know, in the city of Houston and all over our nation, we are set apart from our colleagues, definitely.
That's beautiful. And that's beautiful that you say that. So now I want you to think about this. I know as you reflect on these questions, you can think about stuff you've heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say, or even what you've experienced. So I want, like, what are some of the lessons you have learned from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, either through observation or through guidance from him in these 3 areas? And I'll do one at a time. Like, what have you learned from the minister as relates to being of faith, having faith?
That faith is everything. We talk about the seen and the unseen, and to have faith but not give works or not show works means nothing. It's nothing but lip service. And so as it concerns my faith, I want to be one to put it into practice. Be of those, you know, who I serve, what I serve, based on the works that I produce. And so when I look at the minister, how he has put his faith in action, how he's took over the helm, or he's helping his father, his spiritual father, as he helps resurrect the people and build a nation. That's mighty work. And that's nothing but faith right there. And so the little that I can do with my little bitty self, I want to be shown trusting and believing. And I had an opportunity through the minister had introduced us in the nation to Dianetics. And he wanted to get that dross off of us so that we can be better servants, get those things off of us that kind of impede us in our spiritual growth and how we serve. And going through the process, what I've come to know my faith has been strengthened. But I know going through this process without a fact who our minister is.
Mm.
The divine warner, the guide, the Jesus in our midst. I know this for a fact because I don't, I don't have the spittle in my eye. I can see him as who he really is based on his works and what he does. And then my interaction with him and feeling nothing but love manifests. So my testimony is not just, it was oral reading accounts and studying the teachings and studying his lectures, but now I'm an eyewitness to what he has produced, and an eyewitness what he's produced in me that I'm able to produce around me because of these teachings.
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. You speaking from your heart, it does answer. So what have you learned from your observation or just as relates to of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the area of family?
Oh my goodness. So before I came into the nation, most of our families are probably super dysfunctional. We came out of a dysfunctional family, a broken down, hurt. I grew up in foster home, and each one of those foster homes, was single Black woman. And I knew I wanted, in my relationships with men, I was like the woman at the well, although I may not have had 5 husbands and the man I was with was not my husband. I can kind of bear witness to that a little bit. But I desired to have a family, but I didn't want a dysfunctional family, and I wanted a healthy family. And I know that these teachings, I had to prepare myself before I had to have a family. And I didn't know what courtship was and what the process of courtship was. I didn't have any divine guidance. Even when I was in the church, there was nothing like we have here in the Nation of Islam. You decide you want to be married to somebody after you done dated them and did whatever you did with them. Then you go see the pastor to see if y'all compatible to get married. But it was total opposite here in the Nation of Islam. And, meeting my husband, we went through the courtship process. But before we went through the courtship process, both of us had to go through the purification process before we can even come together. We had to think alike. That's what drew us together, is the fact that, he studied how to give birth to a God, as I was nursing on how to give birth to a God. So we both had a desire to create a family, a unit where God was the center of it all. And so, I tell anybody, sisters that, are not in the Nation of Islam or, is that I'm telling you, there is nothing like the FOI, the training that the brothers receive, the training that we receive to prepare us to be the gods that we are. There's nothing like that. And so now that Allah has blessed me to be in this family, and I have 7 children, 4 girls, 3 boys, and my husband and I had the opportunity to adopt 4 children. So we have 3 biological, 4 adopted. But being in the nation and having the believers who put their arms around us when we received these children, it would not have happened but for my believing family and being in the Nation of Islam. The support that I received, the instructions from the ministers and our beautiful student regional captain, Sister Malika, as far as how to take care of my husband. We don't have these teachings in the world to be able to, because family is at the forefront of everything. It is the first line of defense in this war and building this community. And so now I always pray to Allah that he would bless me with a husband, bless me with a family, bless me with children. But he's done more than I could ask for. And because he's done so much for me, as far as my family unit goes, and every day, I'm so thankful. Even during this time of Ramadan, that we can get up, we can pray together, and to see what Allah has produced through me and these teachings is phenomenal. So I will bear witness to how to give birth to a God. I will bear witness to these teachings. I bear witness to following the process that has been given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in order to secure heaven on earth and the hereafter now.
Very good. Okay, thank you for your responses. What have you learned from observing the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan as it relates to challenging our fears?
I think about the lecture, and I may get it wrong. faith, love,
Fear,
faith.
faith, and truth. Fear,
Yeah,
fear, faith, and truth.
yeah,
Yeah.
fear, faith, and truth.
Yeah.
And being able to confront, being there comfortably, no matter what. And looking at all of the trials that he has had in his life and has in his life, and unapologetically does not bow down to nothing that is on the outside, and that is other than God.
Mm.
And so when you see a man like that, that can challenge governments, right?
Right.
Challenge the people in the high places and the authorities in the high places, then, and he says that is in us as well. And if we are baby Farrakhan's, if we are little Farrakhan's, and we are Farrakhan's, then that fear, that fear diminishes. The fear that I have is to not be pleasing to Allah. But because of these teachings, it's a I won't say that we don't respect danger, right? But to have fear, mm-mm.
Mm.
And I want to be a fearless servant,
Mm.
and one that is unflinching. And what he is one that's unflinching. And he's had the major tests in his life, whether it was a physical test, dealing with his own body, his mental, his spiritual, dealing with his family, dealing with the people around him. If you study the life of Jesus, dealing with the disciples, but we listened to him this morning, just as strong,
Yes.
you know. So, to see how fearless he is when it comes to everything else but Allah,
Mm.
it only feeds me in being strong and being able to confront that which may give me fear.
Mm. Thank you. Thank you. It's interesting as you gave your testimony, this further confirms something that I'm seeing even more. So I read Brother Sharif's book, and after reading his book, it made me realize how it's true for all of us, I believe, and you just further confirmed it, how what we've experienced, it was as growing up, it was all preparation to make us the type of people that we are to help God's servant. And it's interesting, you talked about how you always had this inclination toward God. You were an advocate. You hated the bully. You will fight the bully no matter how large the bully was. And you actually went to a seminary, Baptist seminary, to want to be a pastor. So looking back on your experiences, how have they shaped you to be this helper of Allah's servant in our midst today from your perspective?
So, I think that I've always been like this. Like, Allah created me a certain way. He knew me before I was even in my mother's womb.
Mm.
And Brother Ishmael talked about, the suffering of us, and how sometimes Allah gives us a certain suffering in order to develop us and make us who we are. And I'm thankful for that I had what I had to go through.
Wow.
That he strengthened me, or he laid on me certain burdens that I was able to overcome, because there's going to be somebody else that I'm going to need to help to overcome and help as his helper. So, I do see the hand of Allah on all of this. And I tell people, I accepted the reality. I used to feel bad about how angry I used to get, or how I would want to always fight. I curbed that through Dianetics. I figured out where that came from.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm rising above my emotions, inshallah, rising above my emotions, but to be able to be a better helper. But I know he made me like this. I'm his servant. I'm his servant, and my life don't belong to me. And if you took Islam from me, if you took the nation from me, I don't know what I would do, honestly, because I would not fit anywhere else. And so I was built for this and this time.
Wow, beautiful, beautiful. You are earlier in the text when I asked you, you told me you're registered in the nation for 13 years. And as we have two more questions and we'll close out. What advice would you give to believers? Because the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in his last addresses to us, he spoke about the importance of us not aborting the process. of being made into gods. So what advice would you give to those who are watching this broadcast that can help them to keep going and to not give up, to stay on the, to stay in the process?
So, faith, we talk about faith, what faith is, right? It's those things that we hope for, but the evidence of things not seen.
Yes.
And we talk about the steadfast. Allah loves the steadfast. And so being steadfast, and this is a lesson that I had to learn, especially in my trials, where you talk about aborting or committing spiritual suicide, because that's what really it is. When we abort the process because we don't trust the process or trust what Allah has for us or trust that the unseen is greater for us than what we are seeing at this time. Or trust the fact that we are gods and that we are creators and that we control the universe if we were understood. And that's where our work comes in. But as far as faith goes, to those who are listening, you got to be steadfast and trust that which you don't see, when you are being faithful, when you are doing the work, Allah is doing a mighty works for you. Everything that we do, we say we do it for Allah, we're really doing it for ourselves because there's nothing that he needs from us. And so, but he wants us, as I've read time and time and time in the Holy Quran, for us to have gardens, to have the beautiful life, to have the hereafter now. But it comes with the steadfastness to hold on when we are going through those trials and tribulations, to have the patience to believe and trust that there's something on the other side, to know that, as Brother Ishmael talked about today, to not just be feeling or be in our emotions, but use these teachings to be mathematical about what it is that we desire. We are the gods of this universe. And so if we trust in the supreme being and have faith and trust these teachings are right and exact. I promise you they are. Because when I didn't have the teachings and I was doing it my way, my teachings, I kept bumping my head. But now there's a level of peace for my steadfastness, a level of peace that I have knowing and trusting and believing that the Jesus in our midst, that Allah is truly blessing us through him. Oh my goodness. My faith is only strengthened. The more that I read about the minister and who he is in the Bible and in the Holy Quran, the more I read about the messenger, like you say, it is no accident. And then we have to see where our place is in it all, because he's not disregarding us. We are his helpers, his servants, and be the will of Allah, we'll be his purified ones. And so, you got to work out your faith though. And you can't sit down and be praying, thinking that, everything is gonna be handed to you. So this work is going to be important. So if you wavering on your faith, the messengers say work and everything, work, go to work. You depressed, go to work, work. So work out your salvation, work out your faith by helping to resurrect and helping the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan.
Wow. I'm sure. So if there's and thank you, sis, for those people who are on, if you have any questions, send it through the chat so I can ask it. If not, I'm going to ask this last question. If they have any, we'll add it. So sis, I talked about how when I asked you to participate in this event, you without hesitation, it's kind of like when Allah asked Abraham to go and sacrifice his son, but as soon as Allah asked Abraham was like, according to the Bible and the Quran, what do you need me to do? There are many that have had the opportunity to be touched by the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in a positive way, to be given guidance, where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has helped them bury loved ones, send them to school. He's done all type of great things for them. And some of them are still hesitant, for whatever the reason may be, to give that testimony. What advice would you give to those who have great testimonies that they can share about the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, but they may be a little reluctant?
I would say that your testimony, when we deal in trial, your testimony will prove those who've been accused not guilty. And so sometimes we may not speak, or we keep silent, and our silence can do more damage Let me say that, if you know the truth of the matter. And so it is through our testimony that we can bear witness to who the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is. We can bear witness to who Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan is, when the whole world is giving false testimony about him. And see, when it is incumbent upon us, it is our duty, and we are mandated to give the testimony of this mighty man in our midst, that our lives may be saved. Because his works, he has to attest to his works, but our lives may be saved. And so for me, he's done so much for me. I'm so grateful to Allah. And that when you sent me the text message, it was a no-brainer. I am compelled. I will tell everybody. I am like the woman at the well, knowing that I am as filthy as dirty rags. But if somebody will listen, I have been clothed with the word of God and with these teachings, and I have been changed. So if I don't tell somebody, then I can't stand before Allah knowing that I disobeyed and didn't do what I was supposed to do. So I encourage, if you got a testimony, if Allah has changed your life through this man, if, as the Christians, they have their point of testimony in the church, how they came to salvation. If you've been saved, then it is incumbent upon you to help somebody else and save somebody else by your word of testimony.
Listen, I can do these forever because I just love it, and I learned so much. And I'll give you a moment to think about this. What would you say is, you could say one or even two, the most profound things that you have learned from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan?
It won't take me long. His love for us. It doesn't matter where we come from, what our background is, what we've done. He always finds some part of that which we may think is the worst part, and he finds something beautiful about us, enough that he doesn't turn his back on us, even though we are wayward people, and that he continue to give his life for us, and he gives it in love, nothing but love. And so, we turn our back on him, we turn our back on Allah, but he does not turn his back on us, and Allah doesn't turn his back on us. And he sees the beauty in us. He sees it. And he's always trying to pull it out of us and show us who we really are, which, we are children of God, the Most High God. We are gods. And so he keeps trying to show us that. And that's out of love. And so that part, that part is most profound for me, how much he loves us. I'm saying he is love manifest right there.
That's in the brother posted. He looks past our faults and he sees our needs, right? So sister, thank you. Give your husband and your family the greetings. And I just thank you. I thank you for the opportunity. And then inshallah, as I said, when we are able to meet back in our mosque, we definitely would like to have you here in the city so we can do a part 2 of this. And so other believers who hadn't had the opportunity to hear it, they can experience it in live and in person. And inshallah, we have some other people that's going to be coming up. I spoke to our national student secretary, so he has agreed to participate as well. So, and our regional sister captain says you did a great job. She's watching it.
Thank you, Sister Malika.
Did a great job. I'm waiting for her to send me a date too, so hopefully I'll get one after this is over.
Right.
So thank you all. Go ahead.
Right, in the Quran, you need for one man, 2 women. So come on, Sister Malika.
Hey, talk to her. So thank you. And for everybody who's taking time out of their schedule to witness this here on Zoom and also here on Facebook Live, thank you all. And I would just ask this, for everybody that's watching, if you can go on Facebook, or if you can even text me, what did you gain from hearing our sister's testimony? Just a few sentences. What did you gain? What's a takeaway? And we will greatly appreciate that. Thank you, sister. And I'll make sure you get a copy of this, particular recording. Last question. So you were born with the name Sadiyah?
Oh no, I wasn't born. I was Octavia, and back in 2000, maybe before I even came into the mosque, I always knew that I was not an Octavia. I was I had a spiritual name, and Allah blessed me to figure that name out, which means blessed and successful, right? And Then I came into the mosque.
Wow.
So Allah knew. He's the best knower.
Wow. So thank you. And may Allah continue to bless you. Assalamu alaikum and Eid Mubarak.
Walaikum salam, Eid Kareem.